Oh,
That's all right. 2 feet.
2 feet.
It's 2 feet.
Yeah, I noticed last week. It's almost like I've never been up to drive before when my first driving lesson. Today we're looking at something a little bit different. We're looking at a Toyota. Not just any Toyota, but a Toyota Corolla. But not an ordinary Corolla. This one is a Toyota Corolla Hybrid. And there's two ways to tell if you're looking at a Toyota Hybrid. The first is the badges that appear pretty much all over the car. The second is a little bit more subtle, and that is the actual badge on the front. But what's so different about a hybrid? Under the bonnet we have what looks like a conventional engine, and to an extent it is. The changes come when you start to look at just how everything is laid out. Where you'd normally expect a gearbox to be, there's something else, and there's a battery in the boot where the spare wheel usually goes. The engine is like any other conventional engine, except it does have a higher thermal efficiency so that it uses less fuel and generates fewer emissions. In the car we're looking at today, it's a standard 4-cylinder engine, but in cars like the Yaris, it's a 3-cylinder engine. Where we'd normally expect to see a gearbox, we have the drive unit, which contains the power split device, the power generator, which also acts as a starter motor, and the electric motor itself, which is what actually drives the car. The engine itself isn't actually connected to the wheels. Sat on top of all of this is a box known as the power control unit. It's actually the brains behind the whole power distribution and charging system. In the boot, where the spare wheel would normally live, in these cars, this is where the battery lives. It has a number of cell packs in there, and each of those cell packs contains a number of batteries that are a little bit bigger than a standard AA battery, and these are what provide all the power to the actual wheels. So, while it has a conventional engine that burns fuel just like any other car, it does have some advantages. For example, when the car is stationary, no energy is wasted. The engine's shut off until needed for a bit more power. And that means that at that point it's effectively a zero emissions vehicle. Meaning it's just as clean here in a built-up area as it is out in the country where there's all the trees and fields. So you may wonder, does this make it any different to drive? And the answer is, if you're used to a standard automatic, then this is no different to drive. It's only when you're used to a manual and you're kind of putting your feet down for the gear change, and if you just happen to be putting your foot on the brake as you've also got the foot on the accelerator, then it does an emergency stop, which, if you haven't got your seatbelt on, will put you in close contact with the steering wheel rather quickly. All of the respects, it is just the same as basically driving any other automatic car. On the outside we have the usual alloy wheels, and this is available on pretty much all of the Corolla range. The headlights are incredibly efficient and well designed for things like airflow from the outside of the car, and this carries through to the back of the car. There's little touches as well. While the front bumper design may seem a little bit unconventional compared to what we're used to, everything about it is about airflow, including the actual design of the door handles themselves, which reduces overall drag with the car. Yes, the display's got a little bit more information on it, and you've got the info display, which kind of shows you where the power's actually going, whether it's going to the battery, from the battery, and things like that. So you can sort of see here we've got the engine running which is shown in red there, sending power to the wheels. We've got power going to the battery. As soon as I take the foot off the accelerator, then the motor changes in this from a motor driving the actual wheels to a power generator. That it uses the motor to actually send power into the battery, reclaiming some of the energy that's being used. I think the only thing that's kind of, like I say, is disconcerting with this particular car is you can be driving along and, like now, you can look down and your engine's at zero. There's no revs on it because the engine's shut off. If you don't want to be a regular person and use the accelerator, there is two modes that can actually help you. One of them is the radar assisted cruise mode, which is activated by pressing this button here on the right of the steering wheel. Once you've pressed it, you'll get a message up on the display in front of you saying the mode's been activated. You can then use the plus and the minus buttons to actually then set your speed. The great thing about using this particular mode is that by using the radar sensors on the front of the car, if someone were to suddenly pull in front of you, the car would safely adjust the speed, meaning that you'll always maintain a safe distance from you and them. If you don't want this particular safety feature, you can always use regular cruise control using this button. The difference being it will not use the radar in the front to maintain a safe distance, so if somebody should pull in front of you and suddenly slow down, that's going to result in an accident. The actual controls themselves, perfect. The steering is pretty light. The pickup's pretty good. So this one's the 1.8. There's also a 2 litre, which is a little bit more peppy on the pickup. But even so, this one will push you a little bit if you give it a little bit of beans. So yeah, you've got the radar on the front of the car to basically maintain your distance between you and the car in front. And you spotted the reverse parking as well with the camera at the back, which is incredibly clear. Probably one of the better cameras I've seen of late. I think the only thing I would probably criticise, and it's not a major criticism, it's more to do with personal preference, is that last little bit of brake travel, which is very keen compared to the rest of it. So you end up slowing down gradually, and then you just put that little bit of extra pressure on and boom, you stop. Not quite as bad as pushing the brake down at the same time as pushing the accelerator down, which I've done a couple of times thinking it was the clutch. But it's a big wide brake pedal. Oh,
That's alright. 2 feet.
2 feet.
It's 2 feet.
Yeah, I noticed. The crazy thing is, you do have that instant torque right at your disposal, thanks to that electric motor. And it is full on. And in what looks to the casual observers just a regular family hatchback, it's quite unusual. It gives it a bit of a sporty feel. It's not supercar sporty, but yeah, old style Porsche sporty. If you want the acceleration, it's there. If you don't want the acceleration, just drive it as you'd normally drive it. The actual space in the back is pretty flexible and quite large, to be fair. There are a number of ways it can be configured. Now, when you open the hatch, you'll see the standard look of the boot. You've got the cover at the top, which can be retracted, which will also allow for slightly taller things to be put into the boot. Of course, you can also put the rear seats down, which are also split. So you've got 1/3 and 2/3 for the back. But notice the bar at the top. This also can be removed, and it can be affixed to the top of the seats, which are now flat. The reason for this is so that you can actually put up a net, which is a bit of a safety feature, stopping things from actually going into the driver's area should there be any loose items. But when it comes to the interior, it doesn't stop there. The seats are incredibly comfortable and very adjustable as well, and the whole interior is well laid out. The dash styling might not be to everyone's taste, but it is functional and does have everything laid out properly. The displays are clear, well laid out and well designed. The actual centre console is well thought out, and just ahead of the gear lever you actually notice there's a little toggle switch, and this is for swapping between the different modes and is there so it can't be accidentally tripped. The hill start hold and electronic handbrake are just behind the gear lever, as is a cup holder, which would please Martin. The engine stop-start is just behind the steering wheel, along with the indicator stalks, which are in the normal position. There's controls on the steering wheel, which are well laid out, and the display is actually configurable to an extent. You have your key information about the car, such as the revs, the engine temperature, the fuel level, whether any doors are open. You also have the digital speedometer right at the top, along with the clock and lane departure warning system. You can also see your miles per gallon, of course, when your doors are shut. This can be toggled between different bits of information, and you can also see your main configuration menus here. All of this being controlled through the controls on the steering wheel. If, though, you wanted a slightly more traditional look to your speedometer rather than a digital display at the top, this can be configured in the settings, which we'll show you now. There's two separate displays. You've got the standard display that it's got here, which gives you a bit more information, but you can also then select between a different type, and that will give you a more traditional style of speedometer that takes up quite a lot of the information display. How you want to set it up is up to you, and of course you can change this at any time you want to. The mirror, central locking controls and window controls are all in the usual place by the door handle, and there's a level of detail here that you don't normally see on cars outside of things like Aston Martin. And as with the front seats, the rear seats are just as well spec'd and pretty comfortable as well, with plenty of headroom and legroom for those taller passengers. Air conditioning, really good. It's keeping the temperature nice and cool in here while we're driving along, and yep, it's doing its job perfectly. We've got the big display, as I saw earlier, where we've got the ability to see what the car's doing at that particular moment. And in terms of handling, visibility, things like that, it's great. You've got good visibility out the back, even though the window's quite small by comparison. Wing mirrors are decent size. You've got you've got big windows, so you can actually see everything you need to do when you need to look around, which is pretty important in a car this size, because with it being the estate, it's actually quite large. There we go. Of course, all these things aside, it's not perfect, but these are problems for longer term users. For example, first generation Prius owners are now finding out the problems that can happen when your battery pack has finally given up the ghost and isn't actually as able to hold charge as it once was. When we get to that sort of point, then we get a problem where the engine's effectively doing all the work and fuel and economy suffers. So it's a good idea to keep the car serviced and looked after, but also to get that battery checked, because if it should fail under its warranty time, and all the batteries do tend to have a separate warranty from the rest of the car, then it's worth getting it replaced, because once these things start to drop off, as anybody who's owned a mobile phone for a long time will know, then you get capacity problems. And when you get to the point where the battery can just about hold charge, or the battery maintenance system basically says, nope, I'm not allowing this to be used because we've got problems, then it becomes an issue. And Toyota, being Toyota, with all their experience with the Prius, have thought about this. And when you actually go into the back of the car and look around the edges of the back seats, you'll actually find a little filter area. You're also supplied with a special tool to get these filters out. Every 2 months or so they need to be taken out and cleaned, and this allows airflow into the battery area to keep it cool. This in turn helps to prolong the life of the battery and prevent these faults from occurring. It is something to bear in mind, especially if you're looking at something like this, one of the older generations on the used car market, because if that battery pack isn't in good condition and there's no manufacturer warranty on it anymore, you're looking at either third-party solutions to rejuvenate the battery pack, or you are basically looking at buying a new battery pack which might not even be available for that particular car anymore. So that's something to bear in mind. But other than that, I have absolutely no issue with the technology. Yeah, I have to say, this is definitely a surprise. I kind of knew I was going to like it as a hybrid because I like the technology and things like that. I was quite surprised at just how much I like it. And yeah, with a couple of things changing in personal life recently, new job basically, then this is definitely a car I could actually see myself looking at.